while, when they were running up into the hundreds, she was running out of space. She kept some of the bodies of these girls under her bed, and the place really started to stink.
To cover up, Elizabeth and her 4 senior servants claimed that the girls' deaths were due to disease or accident. And to substantiate this, Elizabeth would bully the local clergy into giving the girls a standard Catholic burial.
Some of them were just thrown in ditches, and eventually one of her cohorts got rid of the bodies, and they simply buried them further and further away.
The testimonies given against Elizabeth Bathory make endless references to how the servant girls died. But one aspect of the evidence is dominant: her association with blood.
Elizabeth had this fixation on blood because there are accounts which are verified in the court record of her having to change her blouse because it got so blood-soaked.
In later, sensationalized versions of her story, it was claimed that the Blood Countess actually bathed in and drank the blood of her victims. These legends, which place Elizabeth Bathory at the center of the vampire myths, are less shocking than what really occurred.
What she would do is she'd have these girls up in cages, and then she had a long lance, and she would pierce them, and the blood would come down and flow on her, and then she would shout obscenities, apparently.
Elizabeth Bathory might have gone on killing with impunity forever, but the year 1610 marked the beginning of her end.
She made a big mistake. As long as she dealt with Slovak peasants, nobody cared. That's a fact. She could have gotten away with it. She went after the daughter of a local Protestant minister. Big mistake. Because this girl escaped and told the story about what was going on up there in the castle. When news came to the Hungarian nobles, well, they couldn't tolerate that. One of their own, you know? That was her critical error.
Ironically, Elizabeth's nemesis was a relative of hers, Count Georgi Thurzo, ruler of estates near the town of Bichka to the northeast of Chachtice. What's clear is that Thurzo wasn't acting out of a sense of moral outrage. He wanted Elizabeth's lands.
Elizabeth was the only one whose court in Chachtice was the rival to his court in Bicha. However much he had fellow feeling for her as a fellow aristocrat, as a fellow Hungarian, he would see her as an obstacle to his ambition.
But Thurzo had to act quickly.
He had to keep the Austrian emperor at a distance because the Austrians wanted Elizabeth's lands and wealth as much as Thurzo himself.
On the bitterly cold night of December 29th, 1610, Thurzo led a party of soldiers into Chachtice Castle. In a letter to his wife, he described what he found when he entered.
We directly came then upon certain men and female servants in the manor house. We found a dead girl there. A second one was dead too, from a number of wounds. I await here until the accursed woman has been deposited in a fortress and a suitable room found for her.
Other accounts have it that Thurzo actually found Elizabeth in the process of beating a servant girl called Doritza to death, as punishment for stealing a pear. On January the 2nd, 1611, only 4 days after her arrest, Thurzo convened a court at Bichka.
Thurzo was very clever. He didn't put her on trial. He put her servants on trial.
What we call the hors d'oeuvre strategy. You know, you throw them the little fish so they don't go for the big one.
Elena Yo and Dorothea were convicted. Their punishment for having used their hands to torture and murder was to have their fingers torn off with a pair of pincers. Still alive, they were then thrown onto a fire. Fitzko was spared the pincers, but was decapitated instead. Only Kata escaped the death sentence. Her fate is unknown. By the order of Count Thurzo, Elizabeth Bathory was still under arrest at her castle at Chachtiche.
Well, I think he was still deciding whether he could get away with trying her or not. And in the end, perhaps he decided it was better just to let her rot, which is what happened.
Elizabeth's sentence was publicly announced by Thurzo. Lifelong imprisonment in one room at her castle in Chachtiche. Elizabeth Bathory's lands were confiscated and divided up among various Hungarian nobles. Thurzo had triumphed. Her imprisonment would last for 3 years. In late August 1614, the bloody countess was found lying face down on the floor of this same room, dead at 54.
History Night concludes after the break on Discovery Channel when we're heading to the Lebanon to learn how an act of terrorism brought the world a new weapon.